Hello again, everybody. It is good to be joining you again at the end of this third week of the program. I can't believe it's all been going by so fast. Now, today we're going to be mixing it up a little bit. Instead of having the educators and myself sort of sharing our thoughts, we're absolutely delighted to be joined by someone who is, well, has been doing everything that we've been talking about on the program so far in terms of influencing, collaborating, engaging stakeholders and sort of the beneficiaries in all the work and all the policy change and social change. So I would like to introduce to you now Danish Ali Bhutto, who is, I guess, the formal title, you're Assistant Director and Speechwriter at the National Assembly of Pakistan, but he is also an incredibly strong advocate for youth and women's rights and has had a huge amount of experience in program management, legislative research, speechwriting, obviously given your job title, but also currently is managing the project management unit and the youth civic engagement program in the National Assembly of Pakistan. So I think you're going to have a huge amount of insights to share with us. And in terms of Danish's own experience, he's been the recipient of the Hubert H. Humphrey Fellowship at the Humphrey School of Public Affairs in the University of Minnesota in the US, working with the governor of Minnesota and supporting the community council there on equity and inclusion. He's also a member of the Future Leaders Connect community, participating in 2018, and is also one of the 15 emerging leaders of Pakistan, selected by the US Department of State back in 2015. So he has a long history of engagement around all of these issues that you've been exploring. And he's represented Pakistan and spoken on various public and parliamentary forums on a range of issues. So, Dinesh, absolutely fantastic that you can join us and share your insights. And I mean, you've just had a little flavour of your experience in influence and driving policy and policy change. What would you say is the most significant, or I guess maybe personally rewarding change that you've been involved in, and how did it happen?
Thank you very much, Richard, for such a generous introduction. I'm delighted to be here. And I remember back in 2018, I was there in this particular Moller Center and like pursuing this Future Leaders Connect. So it's really good to be here and meet you and talk to all these people, wonderful people who aspire to become policymakers and change agents in their respective societies. Coming back to your question, it is a very nice question, I would say. Uh, Going back to my initial days with the Parliament of Pakistan, I've been lucky enough and fortunate enough that I've been associated with something bigger than myself, which is the Parliament of Pakistan. That is where the policy change initiates, and that is where the policy change is ensured that it's effective through oversight and representation. So I worked with the Women's Parliamentary Caucus, which was an informal forum of women parliamentarians in the initial 3.5 years of my career. Uh, Over there, while we were working on gender-sensitive legislation and oversight on women issues, one of the biggest challenges we faced was that most of the laws and legislative proposals that would come, they would be dubbed as anti-Islamic or anti-religious or against the social norms. So this was one of the biggest challenges. So being at the Women's Parliamentary Caucus, one of the advantages was that all the women parliamentarians belonging to all political parties in the Parliament of Pakistan were members of Women's Parliamentary Caucus. So what we did was we conducted a stakeholder analysis. I remember there was this proposal for anti-rape laws and anti-honor killing laws, which is one of the gravest challenges in our country. So there was some resistance by some of the conservative parties. So what we did was we conducted a stakeholder analysis, like we prioritized different stakeholders. We sort of invited these multiple stakeholders to come and talk about what their reservations were. There were advocates for those laws as well, and there were opponents of that as well. Through debates, through conferences, seminars, study circles, all the members of the parliament belonging to different parties came at one platform, and then they sort of negotiated on multiple things, and the studies were conducted, which sort of confirmed that all those things were not against our social norms, they were not anti-religious. Whatever was being carried out and sort of enacted was pretty much in line with the religious and social norms. So this was one thing. So consensus was built and those laws, legislative proposals turned into laws. Second thing, like we are a country with almost 65% young population who are under the age of 30. So before the elections, what happens that youth agenda is never taken on board. Like whatever the manifestos of the political parties are, so whatever the youth component of that manifesto is, that is sort of drafted mostly by people who are almost over the age of 50, 55 or 60 years old. So that is not inclusive. What we did before the elections, we found out a donor because financials are always a problem. We reached out to some senior parliamentarians. We reached out to different experts, parliamentary experts, and people from media, people from civil society, and everybody. We brought them together for a 3-day retreat, and we brought more than 100 young leaders from all regions of the country, belonging to all social fabrics and belonging to all ethnicities. And there were some 15 to 20 young parliamentary associates working in the federal parliament as well as legislative assemblies. They came together, they talked about their issues. A youth agenda was developed, and then that was shared with all the political parties, heads of political parties, and they sort of incorporated that before the elections. So that is how the voice of youth was sort of conveyed to these all political parties, and their aspirations were truly representative in their respective agendas. So these are two policy changes on ground which I sort of am proud of and which I was a part of, and they bore fruit as well. So it was not just that things were done and there was no result.
Mm. So that's your second example there is a really interesting one, which I think can resonate with an awful lot of people who are participating on the program, because you know, what we're hearing in the program is a sense of frustration at being heard as a young person, as a young activist, as someone who can see a solution, can see a way of overcoming a challenge, but isn't being heard by the, as you say, the people over the age of 55 who are sort of in legislative authority. What, assuming that people don't have access to a fantastic forum like the one you created, what do you think that young people can do to make themselves heard, to influence the policy debate?
I would say the frustration that the young people feel is justified. Why? Because across the world, almost 60% of the population is under the age of 30. But if we look at the political representation in world legislatures, according to Interparliamentary Union, we find out that on less than 1% young people are represented in those legislatures. Uh, Two-thirds legislatures, they have no youth parliaments. Civic engagement programs are inexistent. More than two-thirds legislatures across the world. Then non-democratic forces portray and build narratives that these politicians are corrupt, which is not true. Like not all politicians would be corrupt. Some of them are really competent. Some of them are really doing really well for their respective regions, for their country. And that is the case across the world, not just Pakistan, not just United States or UK, but across the world. These narratives have to be fought against. Like if we see the Scandinavian countries, they have almost 10% representation of young people in their legislatures, and we can see the dividends, their human development index, their gender equality gifts, they are pretty much better than any other nation in the world. So that in itself shows that youth has got a lot of potential, which usually goes untapped. Now, political discussions, it is sort of ironic that in our country, in the restaurants and in hostels, I remember it was written that no political discussion is encouraged. Don't talk about politics, don't talk about religion. So discourse and dialogue is discouraged. There are no, like in my country and many other countries as well, youth councils and youth unions, they are banned. Now, how do you expect young people, without providing them any platform, to come forward and contribute to the nation building and contribute? We always say this cliched term that young people are the builders of nation. But until and unless you provide them with a platform, their potential will go untapped. Now, these are some of the challenges which lead to frustration and all of that. But I'm pretty much confident that all the young people have got huge potential. So there's a need for mobilizing youth. Now, that can start from society, that can start from the institutions. We may not, everybody may not have access to the legislators and policymakers and everybody, but young students have access to their institutions, and the people who are at the helm of affairs in their institution, they can reach out to them to arrange for public hearing sort of a thing. They can invite policymakers in their institutions. They can participate in model United Nations. They can participate in civic engagement program in our country. Internships are open throughout the year. Anybody can just through their institute or through an MP or somebody can reach out to us, and we allow them internship, and they engage with the parliamentarians and policymakers. We have like have understanding mutual memorandums of understanding with different academic institutions for research, for internships, for different study circles and everything. So the young people have to take the initiative, start from their institutions, start from their communities, and in this way it'll move forward. And social media is a huge weapon nowadays. Young people can go about, and many young people have got millions of followers on social media. They can voice their views, they can talk about issues which they care about, they can reach out and connect with the people who care about these causes and these issues. I'm 100% sure they'll be very open and very welcoming to all the ideas and the opinions they might have. They can go about signing public petitions through websites. They can write letters to MPs. I remember one of our former prime ministers wrote a letter when he was young to the founding father of the country, and we saw that later he became foreign minister and one of the most influential prime minister and president of the country. So that is where it starts. Instead of apathy and instead of getting frustrated, let us do something and start from somewhere and then move forward.
So almost, in order to be heard, you've got to keep on speaking out and try and multiply your voice as strongly as you can. It's the sense that kind of keep on speaking out and multiply your voice is kind of the way to be heard.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one thing you mentioned there in terms of internships and sort of being part of networks is, again, something that we've covered in the program is the importance of allies and champions and people who will hold your corner when you need them. Now, looking at legislative bodies and looking at people in authority, how can we actually find the right ally for us to work with, who works with us for the right reasons? I mean, it's a very difficult challenge, but how have you done it in the past in terms of reaching out to the people that you know can genuinely help and support you?
Mhm. I believe I already talked about it a bit, but the stakeholder analysis is very important. Now, it's not some rocket science. I can just take out paper, start brainstorming, write all the people who are closely associated with what my goals or aspirations are, or who are distantly associated with that. So once I have chalked out all the stakeholders, then I can prioritize and I can sort of make a sequence of who is important in the shorter term, who is important in the longer term. Once I'm done with the stakeholder analysis, then obviously after that, engagement is the key. You reach out to them and you reach out to them respectfully, and there's always a way to go about it. And in order for that to do, you have to identify the channels which are most relevant, which are most pertinent. So it is not just about reaching out to the prime minister or president or ministers of the country. So you can start off from your teacher, for suppose some teacher in your university that you feel you are inspired by and who's good in their respective field. So you can reach out to them. You can request them to mentor you. You can ask them for some time in order to seek some advice or any of that. So the idea is to keep engaged. We identify our stakeholders, but we don't, and we sort of establish communication with them, but we don't follow up, and then that dies down right there. Uh, Especially for younger students, student clubs within the university, any three students can come together and establish a small network, like focused on one relevant cause that they feel strongly about. They can volunteer with local NGOs. So that is how you build your network. There are multiple fellowships from UK, from United States of America, from other European countries. Uh, Not everybody can get, I understand not everybody can get those, but at least one can try. Ask advice from the teachers. Somebody who has already gone to those fellowships or those different short-term engagements abroad. So that is how you develop your network. Come back and get involved in the alumni activities. There are alumni networks within your countries, so one can reach out to them. And COVID-19, one of the catalysts and the positive thing that has come out of COVID-19 pandemic is virtual learning. So I myself was never comfortable with video calls or Zoom call or online learning or online reading, but this is something that made it sort of essential and instrumental for everybody, that you can't escape it anymore. So that has made things easier. Instead of going out to somebody, and that involves lots of logistics and convenience costs and other things, you can just reach out and request somebody for a virtual meeting for 15 minutes or something. And then, uh, while I conclude this particular question, I would say alliances are the most important thing. So it could be that even if you are, for suppose, starting a small project in your street, or you want to become the prime minister of the country, you have to have an alliance and a network that has your back and that is there to guide you and inspire you. So that is very important in terms of resources and everything.
No, thank you. No, I think that's incredibly useful, and I think your comment about continual engagement as well. Don't make a connection and then kind of assume the connection will continue to exist. You still need to maintain that contact and keep engaging with the stakeholder you're working with. So, just to think about kind of evolving from that, you're talking about how you build people convinced to get behind you and support you. We've been looking at evidence-based policy and the importance of data and research and being able to build the foundations which make you credible in terms of your argument and your solution to the challenge, and even your articulation of the challenge that exists. Do you find that evidence-based policy is a really useful tool in terms of positive engagement, or is it one that only gets you so far and then the rest is politics?
Oh, it is very important. Now, I'll take example of my own country. We are one of the most legislated countries in the world. Like, talk about any subject and you will find a relevant law. But when it comes to implementation, the condition is quite dismal. Now, one major reason behind that is that policies are made in silos. No stakeholder analysis is conducted. No research is conducted. No academic linkages exist. I mentioned that recently, only last year, we started writing to different universities, relevant universities, and trying to establish links of those different universities with the standing committees of the parliament, oversight committees of the parliament, who can provide them with the evidence-based research and whatever the best practices are going on across the world in different countries who may have already implemented all of that. So that is something which was lacking, and unfortunately the pandemic happened and things have slowed down, but I'm sure that is going to reap a huge and effective dividends in the future, because evidence-based policy is the key. Now, when you make policies in silos without proper data, without proper facts and figures of the issue, so I'm sure that is going to fail, and that is what happens in many underdeveloped and developing countries because of lack of evidence-based policy, and research is not as qualitative as it should be, and then engagement again is lacking. multiple stakeholders are not taken on board. Sometimes what happens is that you just copy paste a certain policy from one country where it was successful and then implement it in your respective regions, irrespective of the fact and keeping in consideration what the dynamics, social, economic, or political dynamics could be. And then those policies fail. Secondly, social media is a force to reckon with, and youth in our country especially has been using that very, very constructively. So much so that the current government that is in power, that acknowledges the fact that one of the biggest contributors to their success in the elections was young people who were very vocal about the issues, who were very vocal about the ills of the previous governments, and they have come in power for the first time in the history of the country, this particular political party. And youth and social media was one of the predominant factors, among other factors that contributed to that. Like keeping connected with the policymakers and politicians, I understand not everybody can have access to them, but everybody has access to internet nowadays. One can their emails, their websites are available. One can reach out to their staff, write letters to them, write even send proposals to them. And I'm 100% sure there are many parliamentarians who are open to such ideas. They'll be willing to not just take their proposals and suggestions, but even reach out to them to sort of collaborate on that through their offices or through their different forums. And then there are local offices of local MPs as well, legislators. So there would be one possibility to reach out to their local offices as well, their local staff as well, attend conferences, attend different meetings, engage in different talks and other things. So one can arrange a small talk in a group of friends as well. I remember when I used to live in hostel during my master's. So we'll gather all the people around 20 or 25 people. We'll take one topic and start talking about that. And somebody will chalk out what were the key takeaways from the discussions were, and some of them would put them online and write an article or something from them. So that helps a lot because it comes over the internet and anybody can have access to that and take advantage out of that.
No, thank you. So there are multiple routes to kind of getting engagement, and again, kind of your example of there are ways in which you can reach a particular office. It's not necessarily going to the officer themselves. It's going to their team. It's going to the community that they listen to and supports them. And it's using your evidence to kind of build your case in multiple levels so that it becomes, almost a foregone conclusion that the evidence is accepted and accepted to be true. So
I made one small thing. The Twitter especially, at least I can vouch for politicians in my country, most of the Twitter handles are managed by them. Their team might be managing them as well, but they have access to that particular. Many parliamentarians are active on WhatsApp groups as well. Their team is also active, but they themselves also look out for whatever the information or whatever the complaints are coming their way, and they respond.
So there's a genuine direct route straight to those in authority. That's a useful tip. So speaking of tips and sort of perspectives and skills, based on your experience, what three things do you think are the most important, I don't know, perspectives or abilities or mindsets that people can adopt as they start on this journey of trying to impact policy change?
In my opinion, three things that I consider are very important is communication. It has to be persuasive. Second one, I already mentioned collaborations and alliances that you build. And third one, which I have realized over the last 2 years, and I was sort of following that as well, is data analysis. Because like if I start from the data analysis first, like if you look at the current dynamics, it is we used to talk about information explosion and all of that. But if we look at the data, big data and augmented reality and artificial intelligence, we have seen that how that data was manipulated in case of Brexit, in case of the US elections, the previous US elections. So and some other countries as well, Rohingya crisis as well. So organizations like Cambridge Analytica or some other organizations have manipulated data. But then if there is manipulation, there is utilization as well. So if we look at and if we understand the concepts of data, like how to inspect data, how to transform and model data, like leading to the goal of discovering useful information, and then after that forming informed conclusions based off that particular data, and then eventually it is going to help and support decision making. We talked about policy making being formulated in silos. So data can be crucial in that regard if it is uh, optimally utilized. It can be a huge weapon, a weapon that won't be a weapon of mass destruction, but it will be a weapon of sort of mass construction. So other than that, I talked about collaborations already. Alliances are very important. You can have a multi-million-dollar idea. You can have a vision that is going to transform this entire world. But if you don't have proper needed alliances, you are not going anywhere. So it's more like it reminds me of one of the quotes that even if you are on the right track, you will be stuck over if you stay there. So one has to build alliances and lead the way along with those alliances. Persuasive communication that includes verbal as well as written communication as well. One can start off with building their blogs. WordPress blogs are very easy. Some people can use social media in order to voice their views. And then if you are good at it, or if you got resources, you can build your own websites, which not everybody can do, but blogs and social media is something which everybody got their hands on with the smartphones available everywhere. Uh, so when you are clear and precise about what you believe in, others will start believing in you as well. Because if you are not clear yourself, even if you talk to a politician or even prime minister, if you are not clear and precise yourself, nobody will believe you, nobody will trust you. That is one of the ways to build trust. There is one of the way uh, to to respond to feedback, uh, to criticism, to questions in productive ways. So some people get offended by the feedback or criticism, but if you are good at communication, and if you know your way around persuasion and all of that, you're good to go.
Yeah. No, thank you, Dinesh. And that's an awesome point to end on because it takes us right back in the cycle, as everyone will know on the program, to our very first week where we're talking about being driven by purpose and having a passion behind it. And I love your phrase that if you believe in something, then others will believe in you. I think that that is a perfect signposting for everyone here. That's, you know, you have a vision, and if you can share it and live that vision, then everyone will come with you, how, you know, one way or another. So thank you, Dinesh. Thank you so much for your time today and sharing your insights. No, share everyone's thanks on the program for doing this with us, and wish you all the best with the future changes and endeavours that you're making there in Pakistan.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I was delighted to be part of it, and it was wonderful seeing you again.